Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by BetaShares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, BetaShares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with BetaShares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce an old colleague of mine who has become a friend. Now, this person I worked with over 10 years ago now when we were both financial advisors. And the reason I've got them on the podcast is they have a very, very interesting and touching story about how their life changed after a medical incident. And we often talk on the podcast and in finance about the importance of insurance, but we talk about it usually with financial advisors, but we don't often hear about it from the perspective of the people that's lives are impacted so greatly from it. So I'm so excited to introduce you all to my friend Wade. Wade, welcome to the Australian Finance Podcast.
Thanks, Gemma. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited that you've taken the time to chat to us today. But before we get started, I just want to let our listeners know, just like always, today we might actually talk about financial products. We'll be likely talking about different insurances. It's really important that you don't take any of this as financial advice. We don't know your own personal situation, needs, goals, and objectives. So if you hear anything today, it's really important that you don't act on anything as financial advice. We have great financial, like our partners, Sky Wealth, Phil and the team there are fantastic insurance advisors. If you think you need any insurance, you can see them or your own trusted financial advisor. But we recommend that you look at it for, get advice. It's really, really important. But as I said, I'm really excited to have somebody on here that can actually talk to us about their own experience and how it happened, and not from a scary, this is what you need, but just from a how it can actually change your lives. Because I often talk about that my ex-husband finished work before 40, but we don't hear from the people about how it changed their life. So Wade, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today.
Not a problem at all, Gemma.
Yeah, and I know you do quite a bit of speaking about this, and so it is something that you're quite comfortable with, and that you are making sure that people understand the importance of it, and just spreading the word that this can happen to everybody, well, anybody, and at any time. Because how old were you when life changed so dramatically?
For this incident, it was 41.
Yeah, wow.
So for the type of incident I had, which no doubt we'll get to in a minute, it was unexpected.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. I always talk to people and it seems that people think that it won't happen to them, but then everybody seems to know somebody who has been affected by a medical incident that stopped them from working, or, an event that has been so devastating. So I'm like, people think it won't happen to them, but they know people it's happened to. So this stuff does happen. So take us back to take us back to the incident, and if you're comfortable, tell us kind of what happened, what life was like before, and what really happened at that time.
Yeah, sure. We were just an average family. 3 young daughters. My wife, Justine, was a stay-at-home mum, and I was working with you at one of the major finance organisations in Australia. We had just bought our first house, so we'd only just moved in probably, not even a year before the incident occurred, and we'd just returned back from our first family overseas trip. So, but like I said, we were very average. We had 2 old cars with 300,000 Ks on it. We lived very modestly, and at the time, 2 weeks before the incident, literally 2 weeks on the dot, my wife and we had a chat about it, and she wanted to go back to full-time work. So she found her dream job, got back to work, 2 weeks into it in her dream job, and then we had this incident occur. So it turned our lives upside down a bit.
Yeah, but that's really, really, really hard. So what actually happened?
Okay. So at the age of 41, I had a major heart attack. How it all occurred was I was literally at work, just finished a client appointment. The client left the office and I found myself feeling very, very, very lightheaded, to the point where I couldn't sit on the chair anymore. I couldn't balance on the chair. So I had to lay down on the ground. And then I just broke out in a sweat. Now, when I say broke out in a sweat, it wasn't like a little bit of perspiration. It was like someone poured a bucket of water on my head. Like I went from, like I am now, just to soaking wet. So I knew something wasn't right. I was kicking my foot against the door and screaming out for the office manager. She managed to come in and I just yelled, "Call an ambulance." And then after that, I fell unconscious, and I can remember the ambulance arriving. Now, for those of you who don't know, I was up in an area of the Sunshine Coast called Buderim. Now, Buderim on the Sunshine Coast is an elderly population, if I can put it politically correct. So I was extremely lucky. An ambulance got there in 4 minutes. So with their help, I was told I had to be resuscitated and shocked back to life 3 times in the ambulance. And then they took me to Nambour Hospital for a night. So one night in Nambour Hospital, then they transferred me down to the PCH Hospital in Brisbane, the Prince Charles Hospital, which is the heart specialist hospital in Queensland. And then I spent the next 9 weeks in hospital. So 3 weeks in ICU, which was virtually unconscious for the whole 3 weeks. I've got very, very little snippets of consciousness throughout that first 3 weeks. Then 3 weeks in the heart unit, then 3 weeks in rehab, where I had to learn to walk again, learn to ride again. Had to do numerous cognitive brain function exams and everything to get that as close as we could back to normal. And even then, after 9 weeks in hospital of recovery and lots of smaller operations and treatment, they let me come home for a period of time.
Wow, that absolutely just gives me chills. Like it's so scary to hear that it just happened all so suddenly. It just takes me right back, because I remember actually hearing about it happening and how traumatizing it was for all the staff as well. And your poor family not knowing what was happening at that time, and for those 3 weeks, it would have been absolute touch and go.
It was, and obviously I'm going on what I've been told on this information because I was unconscious for the first 3 weeks. But the first night, even when I went to Nambour Hospital, they really didn't know what had happened. They thought I might have had a fall at work. They thought it might have been a virus of some type. And it wasn't until they scanned. So at that time, my wife was at the hospital waiting. She got the phone call. I had a couple of staff members that were there as well. So my manager was there and another advisor was there at the hospital with my wife. And it wasn't until then when the doctor came out and asked my wife if I have had heart trouble in the past, to which my wife replied, no. I used to be a former athlete. I've never had a heart issue before. I was in half decent shape, I'll be honest. I wasn't in the best shape of my life, but I wasn't in terrible shape. And the doctor said, well, we've noticed there's some damage on his heart. And that's what led to the doctors finally going, okay, there's something going on here. They investigated a little bit further. They put in, I think it was 2 stints at the time. And that's when they said, okay, it is the heart. We need to transfer him down to the Prince Charles Hospital. So there was a very, very big unknown there for about 48 hours in terms of exactly what it was and what was going to be happening. When I got wheeled into ICU, my wife was told I've got about a 20% chance of coming out. I wasn't in good shape at all. And like I said, for those next 3 weeks in ICU, I've got little glimpses where I can remember, whether it's communicating with a nurse or a doctor very briefly and then back out into unconsciousness.
Yeah, wow. And so that period of time, obviously you're not working, your wife's not working. You would have had, sick leave, all of that kind of stuff that would have kicked in at that time. I presume that she wouldn't have, though, being in a brand new role.
No. To this day, she hasn't forgiven me. She had to quit a dream job, which is a bit of a bummer. But yes, you're right. Immediately I had all my sick leave and holiday leave and everything like that I could take. And obviously I had a fantastic manager at the time. He really helped us out and looked after us and made sure that all got put through. So, that was one small piece of help on this journey that we endured.
can take a lot of pressure off having those kind of things in place, right? Like imagine if you were self-employed in that instance, like how much extra safety nets you'd have to have in place, like to kick in, because like those types of things can just take out some of that financial pressure in very, very stressful situations.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
how long all up were you out of work for, or how long was it that life had dramatically changed, or has it still changed?
Yeah, it still has changed, and the first 9 weeks in hospital leads on to now the second step of this medical incident that occurred. So I spent the 9 weeks in hospital, then I went back 2 weeks later for a checkup. Now, in that time, I wasn't good. My heart function was at about 20 to 25%. I couldn't walk a flight of stairs. My exercise every day consisted of getting from bed into the wheelchair, sitting down to shower, everything like that. So when I went back for my checkup 2 weeks later after I got released, the surgeon and the doctors told me, look, this isn't working. We can't surgically repair your heart. You're going to need a heart transplant. So we just got off the canvas from the first bit thinking, okay, we can recover from here. We'll be all right. To now, okay, there's a whole new path we're going down now. So that really changed everything. So part one, we thought we got through. Part two completely laid us on our back again.
So just extra hurdles that keep coming up.
Correct.
And this would be massive emotional hurdles, like physical hurdles for your body to deal with, emotional hurdles, and then they would all have huge financial consequences, I would imagine, as well.
Absolutely. And it's one of them things where, and everyone's been in this position, you don't know what you don't know. So when they say heart transplant, it took a while to sink in. When I was in hospital for the first 9 weeks, there was a little bit of quiet talk about, I might need a transplant, but I was determined I was going to get out of there with my own heart, and I did, but it wasn't going to last. So when we heard the term heart transplant, I broke down. Absolutely broke down, because you don't know anything about it unless you really need to, or unless you're involved in that world. So the next several weeks was very intense, very emotional. I had to go in and get a whole range of tests done, because they don't just, they don't have hearts on a shelf that they can give out willy-nilly. They make sure that they're giving a heart to someone who's going to, as crude and as cruel as it sounds, but they're going to give a heart to someone who they think will survive.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds harsh, but unfortunately we can only go off donor hearts, and there's only a limited amount. So just coming to that realization that, okay, I need a heart, but how long is it going to take to get a heart? And it's a very, very morbid thought when you think, well, my survival depends on someone else's loved one, unfortunately, passing away. So there's a huge emotional toll just getting prepared for that potential upcoming transplant. And like I said, we had to do, then all the financial stress started to hit us again, because then it was like, well, okay, after the first incident, I knew I wasn't going to work for a period of time. Now this is just going to extend it even further. So it brought up all the worry and the stress about what we're going to do for money. How much longer is my sick leave going to be there? I've used up all my annual leave. When do they expect me to go back to work? I can't do this. Where's the income coming from? We're a single income family. So it really, really shook us to our core again.
Yeah, absolutely. And this whole time, are you still in Brisbane at this point? Because this is pretty far away. Or were you back on the coast?
No, after the first 9 weeks, they released me and I could come back to the coast.
Okay, great. So you could be in your home living great.
Yeah, so I was in the home, but it had to be on the understanding that I could only be no more than an hour away from the hospital. So they were pretty strict about that. And plus I had to go in literally every week or 2 weeks for checkups. So, but I was living at home at that point. My wife was my full-time carer at that point. And we obviously still had the 3 girls going to primary school as well.
Yeah, so the girls could be in a bit of a routine with their school and everything like that. So there was some normalcy there with them.
Yeah, and it was the school population and the school staff and other parents, they were amazing. They picked up the girls, they dropped off some meals for us. So everything that people could do to help, they did. And that
community.
made things, that community feeling, and that made things a little bit easier. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a lot of help, but just in my situation, it made things a bit easier, which was really good. And, I'm always thankful to those people that helped us out.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so all of this was going on, and as financial advisors, we recommend everybody gets insurance for incidences like this. So tell us, did you have insurance to cover yourself for an incident like this?
I did. Now, with this one, I got to take you back quite a few years just to tell you how I got to this position that I was in. So back when I was much, much younger and darker hair, I was playing Division 1 basketball over in the States. So I was in very good shape. I was very lucky to be offered a full-time scholarship. Over there, enjoying life, attending university, doing everything that a university student athlete does. And then one night, when I was out with a couple of friends, I noticed I found a huge lump in my neck. So I thought that was strange. It didn't hurt. It was just a big lump here in the side of my throat. Anyway, I went and got it checked out. No definitive answer, but something wasn't right. I'd lost a step or two. I was a little bit tired all the time. So when I come home, I decided, okay, I'm going to get this checked out a bit more. And we underwent some further tests and found out that I had cancer. So I had Hodgkin's disease. So I had to undergo 6 months of chemotherapy, 1 month of radiation. That put an end to my promising basketball career, I'd like to say. But what it did was it made me, at that point in time, my dad's wife, Karen, if you ever listen to this, Karen, thank you very much again for all your help. She was a financial advisor as well. So we had a talk, and she said, look, you need to make sure you get all the insurance you can get. So as I changed jobs, and your listeners and viewers may know that when you go to certain jobs, you automatically get superannuation and insurance.
That default cover with different funds. Yep.
Yeah. So as I went through different jobs, I kept all the super funds open so I could keep all the insurance that I got. Because I knew that if I wanted full insurance, after having cancer and going through 6 months, either I'd get a very big loading, or I'd get exclusions, or I might not get cover at all. So I think at one stage I had about 6 different super funds with 6 different insurers, and I had them all going at once. So I was transferring money, funding this one, funding that one. And then eventually I was lucky enough that I could merge a couple together. So that made the admin of it a little bit simpler. So going back to your original question, yes, I did have insurance in place. Number one, because I had accumulated these super funds and insurances over time, over about a 20-year period. But I'd also gone and applied for a little bit of extra cover, just so if something was to happen, my family was no worse off. Just so they could, continue living the life they were in the same house, maybe a little bit extra so they can get a new car or something like that and not go back to work for a few years. Nothing extravagant, but still, it was and I know it's all relative, but for us, it was a sizable amount. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is so important around the strategy you had with your insurance, knowing that you had pre-existing, because while this medical event wasn't related to your past one could have stopped you getting insurance completely. And you could have gone, well, I can't get insurance, but there was there's totally different medical events. So you can actually get cover, but you need to be quite strategic about it. And people don't realize, but we always hear, consolidate your super and that kind of stuff. And then people do it, and then they lose really important default cover. So I always talk about, like, my ex-husband, he couldn't get insurance because he had so many pre-existing, and the insurers kind of go, most of them have like 3-strike rule and you're out. And they're like, if we have to say no to 3 pre-existing rules, we usually say no to your whole policy. So he couldn't get any insurance. But we found these 2 old super policies, super funds that he had from when he was 18 that still had a couple of dollars in them. So we just started putting money into them to keep the insurance going. And that's what he eventually claimed on when he was 38 or so. something. So this is so important.
Yeah.
You need to actually be taking an interest in what the policy is, why it's important for you to hold, and potentially having more than one super fund is okay. Yes, you're going to pay double admin fees, but your admin fee most of the time is what, $50, maybe $100. Like it's minimal for that. The peace of mind of you and your family being protected.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you've just went through. You have to do your research. You really have to, because we've had clients walk into the office for financial advice and going, "Oh, just want to get rid of this and get rid of that and roll it into one super." And when you look at it, they've got a sizable amount of insurance that they've got. No one can take it off. No one can take the insurance off you unless you cancel it. So once you've got it, it's yours. As long as you pay the premiums, it's there forever and a day. I was very, very strict about that. Even though I was young and foolish still, one thing I was very strict about was no, keep that super, keep putting money into it, just keep it open so that the insurance stays in place. And then, like I said, then I had a little bit of extra insurance just to get it up to the levels that my wife and I felt comfortable with. Not that, a little side note, my wife was one of those people that every time she saw the insurance premium come out of our account, she would not be happy because we were paying quite a bit for insurance. And honestly, she's the biggest proponent of financial advice and insurance now you could ever get.
Big advocate.
Absolutely. She
That's like my ex-husband now. You hear him at the pub after a couple of beers and he's telling everyone about insurance and superannuation.
Yeah, look, it's the whole insurance thing is not a fun conversation to have. Like, how much do I need? How much do you want if I pass away? Do you want to live in the same house? Do you want a new house? It's not a fun conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And, as you'd know, being an advisor, we have these chats many, many times throughout the course of a year. So for someone off the street, a client that comes in, it might feel a bit uncomfortable at first, but we need to get down to the nitty-gritty of it. And you want to make sure that you can sit back and go, right, I know that the cover I've got in place is going to suit my needs. It's going to help us if something happens.
Yeah. And I think people also tend to think that what they have right now needs to be forever, but it doesn't. Like, say what you need right now, potentially as you build your assets, your super builds, you get your debt level down, you can shave cover off. It doesn't have to be that level forever. It's just while you need it. It's there as a safety net. So it doesn't, it's not set and forget. If every year the insurance company's putting it up with it, with that indexation, you can potentially be shaving it down to be more cost effective. It can be really proactively managed, but I think it's so vital. Like, if your situation is going to be severely impacted with the loss of a spouse, or with the spouse not being able to work, or yourself not being able to work, I think insurance is absolutely vital. But it always surprises me that people think life insurance is the most important thing. And to me, I don't. I'm like, and I, because we talk about insurance all the time, I probably am a little bit harsh with how I say it, and I probably need to be a little bit more gentle with it, I guess. But I'm like, oh no, worst case scenario is your spouse survives and they become a financial burden. But just from a purely financial thing, if they survive, they're now a financial burden on the household income. That's like, financially, that's way worse. So that's why you need to insure them. But people tend to have lots of life insurance, but not, income protection or TPD, which is total and permanent disability cover, or trauma. They're the kind of ones that can be really devastating to a household.
Yeah, and that reflects my story 100%. I was a huge financial burden to my family because I lived. And living through these events is very costly. So like I said, we went from, very briefly, a 2-income family down to 0 income. My wife couldn't go back to work because she was a stay-at-home mum. I had to undergo numerous trips to Brisbane, and that was weekly, monthly, fortnightly. I had all the specialists I had to see. I had to see psychiatrists, psychologists, the local GPs, nutritionists, dermatologists, who else? There's a whole range of specialists that I had to see, and we had no income coming in. So lucky for us, I had, like you just went through before, we had income protection in place, which I had luckily increased when the kids come along. And I had TPD cover and I had life cover. Now, like you said, life cover did nothing because I survived. But the income protection kicked in after we lodged the claim, and we lodged it very quickly. So that come in, and the income protection went on for quite a period of time until the insurers rang me up one final time and said, "Oh, look, we don't think you're ever going to go back to work." So they paid me out in full. They paid me a lump sum. Now, luckily for me, I was able to get some really good help with some amazing people and get back to work eventually. But even that took me about 4.5 years. So there was a period there where I honestly thought I'd never go back to work because I was just not in a physically after the heart attack. I was a mess. After the transplant, I was really good physically. I felt like I could take on the world, but mentally, I was absolute write off. I was diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety, and all of them would find their way to all of them would find their way to come out once or twice a day every week. So there was a period of time there where I was a real wreck. So yeah, the financial burden of living through a traumatic event is huge and can't be undersold. Yeah.
And do you feel like things are like stable kind of now and that you're kind of back to a level that your family was, or do you feel like things have kind of be changed forever?
Things have changed forever. That you can't go through something like that without something changing forever, but they definitely have. But financially, the beauty about the insurance that we had in place is that when little side note here, we were all sitting in, I remember we were in hospital after I was told that I needed a transplant, and we had a social worker from the hospital there. And I wasn't aware of this at the time. You might be, but Karen, my dad's wife, who was a financial advisor, she wasn't aware of this. The social worker looked at us and said, "Well, now that you're on this transplant list, you can get TPD cover." So apparently if you go on an organ transplant waiting list, you automatically qualify for TPD. Now, we were not aware of this. All my years in financial advice, I'd never heard of that. So like a bull to a gate, Karen got working on it straight away, lodged all the paperwork, and we got a TPD claim. Now, the amazing thing about the TPD claim is if you are on an organ transplant waiting list, you can get paid the TPD. But if you get transplanted before you get paid out the TPD, they may hold back on it and wait and see how you recover. So you go from automatically qualifying for TPD to, well, hang on a sec, we're going to wait and see. Now, as luck would have it for us, we got paid out 2 weeks before I got transplanted. So we were very, very lucky. And when we got paid out, it was as simple as a phone call. And I hung up the phone and I told my wife, "Oh, they've agreed to pay out our TPD cover." Now, I know it's all relative, but for us, it was a sizable amount. And it wasn't a celebration time. It wasn't, "Oh, high fives all around." We simply just looked at each other and just exhaled. We were like, "Okay, thank God. We know the house is going to be okay. We don't have to sell the house. We know that the cars, we know we can still send the kids to school. We know that we can still afford groceries. And we're still going to have money put into super so that all these years that we can't work, we're still going to have something there at retirement." So insurance isn't going to, it's not a time for celebration. It's purely to help you live. And that's what it did. And that's how, it did change our lives. And it will continue forever because it's really helped us get through a period of time where we had huge unknown factors. And recovery never goes smoothly. I had to get admitted after the transplant. I was admitted into hospital 3 more times over the next 2 years for various little things. Once I had a collapsed lung and the doctors don't know how that happened. I picked up a virus from the transplant. So there's all these little hiccups along the way. It's never smooth. So having that money in the background, having that insurance payout and having that income protection cover for that period of time, it just, like I said, it just allows you a bit of space and a bit of room to breathe. You don't feel so claustrophobic about the financial costs, the burdens, how you're going to afford this, how you're going to pay for your car service, how you're going to pay the rates on your house, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
and you never know when things are going to go back. Like as you said, like things were good and then they were bad. So you really need to make sure that what you do with that money is going to last, because you're not going to get insured again and they're going to pay you out again, right? So that money now has to serve you for the rest of your life if you can't ever work again and do all of these kind of things. So you need to be really, really, there's like, so I love that it takes off the pressure, like, and it is a big relief. Like, yes, it's taken off the pressure. Now we can focus on the medical side of things, but there is also that thing that, well, we need to do right with this money so it can last us and fund our lifestyle.
Absolutely. And this is a very important part of this whole process, is that I went and paid for financial advice. So I'll put my hand up. I was in no mental condition to sit down and work out numbers. I was off in la la land for half the time, but I knew that, okay, we need to get advice on this. So I went to my previous employer and we got advice, paid full price, by the way. And we paid.
So some insurance policies give you a financial planning benefit.
Yeah, not this one, unfortunately. But in saying, look, it was worth every penny, even more so, without giving too much information about numbers and that. But getting this financial advice saved me over $175,000 in tax. So getting the insurance is one thing. That's very important. But just as important is getting really good, proper financial advice on what to do with that money. And this is going to sound like I'm bad-mouthing, but I'm not. But you often see advertisements about law firms saying, oh, we can help you with your insurance claim. And that's great because people need help doing it. That's only step one, though. Step two is getting advice on what to do with the money once you receive it. Because like I said, some people lose a lot of it in tax depending on how the structure is. And obviously we're not going to go into detail about that today. That's a bit more of a personal, go see Gemma, people out there, about advice on doing that. But it is really important because it can save you a lot of money and make sure you're structured in the right way. There's things to consider, such as Centrelink and how that might be affected if you are on Centrelink, or if you can get Centrelink payments. In my situation, I wasn't eligible to get it because, believe it or not, they told me I wasn't disabled enough. So don't go out there thinking that, oh, the government will take care of me, Centrelink will take care of me. They don't want to pay you unless they absolutely have to. So getting financial advice is an important thing.
Yeah, and people often think, oh, I don't need personal insurance because I could get, if that happens, I could get the disability support pension. But I don't think that's even $30,000 a year. And it's so hard to get. I've gone to fight for clients that are severely disabled and aren't eligible for it. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So you just can't rely on that. But yeah, there's so many different ways that you can do it. But one of the most important thing is, if you get that payout, that you do get financial advice, because generally what happens is, say if you've got the insurance through a super fund, you get a letter from the super fund saying, hey, do you want to keep this in super, or do you want to get it paid out? And people go, oh, let's pay it out. But then you get it taxed. Whereas there are strategies that you could do it a different way. It can still get paid out to you, but just through different mechanisms, different strategies that significantly reduce the tax. So financial planning advice is very important. And I love that you went and got advice, because even me, who's not in that kind of position, I get financial advice, because our money is we're so emotional about our money when we're not in these life-threatening kind of situations, that we do actually need somebody for an external, that second kind of emotionally removed people to give us advice. I think that's so important.
Exactly. And like I said, it was expensive, but it was worth every single penny, because, there were some large numbers involved, and hence the fees, going to be increased for that. But I would never second guess that decision that we made. Justine, my wife, she was forced into this world that she had no understanding of. So for her, just to be able to sit in front of a professional that knew what they were talking about, and to walk out of that meeting going, okay, I know everything's taken care of. I know we're going to be fine. Just seeing that weight lifted off her shoulders, because she still had the 3 young girls at home to look after as well. That was a huge, huge benefit, just to see her go, okay, I know as well. Wade knows, but now I know that everything's going to be taken care of and we're going to be fine. And that's a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. So, it's It's literally giving me like shivers talking about all of this, because like I've helped clients with claims. Obviously my ex-husband's gone through it, and it's bringing back memories of you going through this, because it was such a big deal for everybody in the branch, and knowing how, your young family and your wife having to deal with all of this. If you had to say there was one, it's difficult, but if there was a silver lining of you going through this,
Yep.
could you say there's a silver lining of this happening?
Yeah, there is. And look, it sometimes it's hard. I'll be honest, sometimes it's hard to find one. And, I still, even this many years after the transplant and after the heart attack, I still have bad times. And that's just part of it. It's an ongoing, I'm an ongoing work. I'm continually trying to work on that area. But there is, you get to after going through a few things like that, you kind of get the attitude of, well, you know what, if you're in doubt about doing something, just do it. I mean, my kids are getting older now. Like, they might be going to uni next year or overseas on their holidays, so they're not going to be at home anymore. So anytime I've got the opportunity, like we just got back recently from a trip to America, and we hummed and hawed on it for years, and then we got to the point where we just said, stuff this, let's just do it. It's going to be a once in a lifetime thing. And we had the greatest time. So if there is a little bit of a silver lining, it's that, okay, when we get to a choice like this, should we do it or not? Usually we'll jump in feet first.
Yeah.
So and not only that, the other silver lining is the people I've met along this journey. I've met some amazing people, amazing doctors and nurses, staff members at the hospitals, but also amazing people that have gone through the transplant journey, the same as me. I've made some lifelong friends out of it. And I've got to, like you said at the start, I have done a bit of public speaking about this. So I've had the opportunity to spread the word about organ donation and about the importance of having insurance and seeing a financial professional. And the people you meet along the journey are, they help keeping you on the straight and narrow. So it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. And so you work a lot with, is it charity or the organ donation? Tell us about that.
I work with, I do a little bit of work with the Common Good. Yes, they do a lot of medical research. They do a lot of fundraising for it, especially into the organ transplant side of things. And I've put a few posts on LinkedIn lately about a couple of the latest medical developments which are amazing. Hopefully we get to the point where it's no longer we need heart donors for a transplant. They can use an artificial heart. So these are the type of medical advancements they're making. But I can also say to anyone out there listening or watching, please put yourself down as an organ donor. It's something very important. And we always, this sounds horrible, but we always need more donors. There's not enough organs out there for everyone on the transplant waiting list. And this is livers, kidneys, corneas, hearts, everything, lungs. So that's another important, if you do decide to go on the transplant list as an organ donor, please tell your family, because your family has final say on it. Even though you might nominate and say, yes, I want to be an organ donor, your family has final say. So let your family know of your wishes so that your wishes can be followed through if it ever has to happen.
And how do you do that? I remember a long time ago you used to put it on your driver's license, but how
Correct.
do you go on is that still where you do it?
Still there. Yeah, you can put it on your license, but you can also go online just looking under organ transplant or transplant org, and you can nominate, put your details there. But like I said, the most important thing is to tell your family your wishes and what you've done, because if they're not aware of it, you might put down that you're an organ donor, but if your family's not aware of it, they might just say, no, we're not going to do that. So make them aware, and hopefully in the worst case scenario, you might be able to help someone.
Yeah. And it's so important, like even, things like where your will is, where your insurance is, where you're banking, like you need to have these conversations with people. It is so important.
Can I please just add a little bit about the will and the power of attorney type thing? This is a little thing that it's, so I had a will done up, but I never signed it. So, and I had an enduring power of attorney drawn up, but I never signed it. And it's not that I didn't want to, I just forgot. And I just didn't
get around to it.
Didn't get around to it. So I can remember, this is one of the little bouts of consciousness I had in that first 3 weeks when I was in ICU. I can remember, because my wife couldn't get access to all of our bank accounts. She could only get access to a couple, because I had one where my pay went into. So all my holiday pay, annual leave being paid into account, she had no access to. So we had to, while I was in hospital bed with tubes going in my throat and down my, in my neck and monitors everywhere, I've got little bouts of consciousness where I can remember someone asking me, Wade, do you want to give your wife Justine, power of attorney to operate all your accounts? And I can remember all I could do was nod. That was all I could do. I couldn't speak. All I could do was put my head up and down. I can remember them lifting my hand, putting it on the paper, and just them saying, look, just make a mark. And it was, my wife was there, the doctor was there, a specialist was there, a justice for the peace was there that was brought up from downstairs at the hospital. So you need to make sure you get a will drawn up and sign the bloody thing. don't leave it like I did. It just makes it's
that
just,
could have been weeks and weeks of you not being able to do that. Like,
correct,
oh wow, that's okay.
So
that is a
very
big important thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, hugely important. So don't put it off. I know it's not a fun, like I said from the start, insurance and wills and power of attorneys, they're not a fun thing to talk about, but they're a necessity. They really are. This is also not about you, it's about your family. Yeah. So make sure you're looking after your family, make sure you do the right thing by them, get the insurance, get the power of attorney in place, and speak to professionals about it and get the help you need.
Yeah. Absolutely love it. Okay, so I will link in the chat about the charity that you talked about, where they can find that. I'll put in about the organ donation stuff as well, so people can check out that. But I always like to ask people to finish up, and this can be just from your experience as a financial advisor or life, whatever. But what is the money advice that you wish you could tell yourself when you were 20? Any wise words for 20-year-old Wade?
The sooner you can invest, the better. If you could just get just a growth fund. Honestly, at that age, just a growth fund. Like, obviously, if I had a magic ball, I'd like to go back to when Bitcoin first came onto the scene. And I can remember when that first came on. I can remember listening to the news report of when a gentleman bought a pizza with Bitcoin for like $16 or something like that. I can still remember listening to it on the radio. And nowadays, if he had kept that $16 of Bitcoin, it would have been worth however many millions. But the best financial advice was just start investing as soon as humanly possible. The moment you've got some spare money, whether it's in your super, and just stick with it, and form a behavior where every paycheck or every month a certain amount goes into your savings. And it's just, get rich slowly over time. But if I had a time machine, there's a lot I'd like to go back and buy, but I just wish I'd started quite a few years earlier than when I did.
Yes, I think that's most of us, right? We always wish that we had started earlier, and that's going to be future us as well. So that's why if you haven't started, you should be starting now, because future you is going to be going, oh, well, I wish I had started now. But Wade, thank you so much for joining. I'm so thankful that you were willing to share your story. I'm sure that the community will have got so much out of it, and be really, really inspired to be looking at their insurance and making sure that they do have the cover that they need, and making sure that, they do have things like wills and power of attorneys in place. And it's such a touching story. And I'm so glad that you're in the place that you are now and doing so well. So thank you for joining us on the Australian Finance Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gemma. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.